You know that specific kind of whiplash you get when you watch an AI try to do math?
Oh, I know it well. It's
Buddy,
disorienting.
it really is. 1 minute, the model is confidently inventing some brand new theorem that sounds totally plausible, and you're thinking, okay, the singularity's here, peck it up.
And then literally 10 seconds later, it's struggling with something you'd see in, what, 10th grade algebra.
Exactly. Or worse, it hallucinates a citation that just doesn't exist.
It's that classic difference, right, between sounding smart and actually doing the work. Language models got very good at talking about math. They have the lingo, the style of a research paper.
But the actual reasoning.
That has been a much, much steeper hill to climb.
Right. But today, we're talking about a system that seems to have found some actual climbing gear. We're unpacking the story of Aletheia DeepMind.
And it's interesting because it's not just a new model.
No, that's the thing. It doesn't behave like a chatbot. It's more like a lab partner, one that tries ideas, gets critiqued, fixes its own mistakes, and frankly acts a lot more like a human mathematician than anything I've seen before.
It's a fascinating shift in thinking. We aren't just looking at a smarter model here. We're looking at a whole new way of working.
And just to set the stage for you, we are pulling this discussion directly from an article published on Binary vs. AI. The title is Aletheia DeepMind, The Architecture of Mathematical Reasoning Mastery.
So we're going to walk through that piece section by section.
Yeah, to really understand how this system pulled off what they're calling a breakout performance. And when I say breakout, I mean it just crushed a benchmark where other top-tier models, the ones you and I probably use every day, are barely passing.
So I guess our mission today is to unpack how. Because the secret sauce here isn't just we built a bigger brain. It's about a specific workflow. It's how the system thinks, checks itself, and corrects its course.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The first section of the article is titled Aletheia DeepMind in one paragraph. What exactly are we looking at here? Because it makes this pretty bold distinction right away.
Right.
It says Aletheia is an agent, not a model.
Right.
Is that just marketing, or is there a real difference?
No, that is the critical distinction. Think about a standard chatbot. You type a prompt, it predicts the next word. It's a straight line, A to B.
Okay.
Aletheia is an agent. It wraps a reasoning model, in this case, Gemini DeepThink, inside a loop. It generates something, then it verifies it, then it revises it, and it just repeats that process.
The article uses a metaphor I love. It says it's like a high-end proof intern with a super fast scratch pad and a really stern internal reviewer.
That's a perfect way to visualize it. Imagine you have this intern who is brilliant, creative, but a bit messy.
I can picture that.
So they scribble down a proof. Then you have a separate reviewer standing over their shoulder who looks at it and says, hold on, line 3 doesn't follow from line 2.
Or you just made up that citation.
Exactly. That's not a real paper. And the intern takes it back, fixes it, tries again. That loop is Aletheia.
So it's optimizing for reliability over speed.
Precisely. The article is clear on this. It's optimizing for fewer hidden gaps and fewer hallucinated citations. It runs these loops until the solution passes muster, or, and this is so important, until it just admits defeat.
Right, because checking what it is not is just as important. The source says it is not a push-button theorem machine. It won't guarantee novelty or, formal rigor on demand.
No, it's not a magic oracle. It's a reliability upgrade achieved by process, not just raw model IQ. That's the one thing the article wants you to remember. It's the workflow.
Okay, so that's the what. Now let's talk about the wow. Because Section 2 is called Aletheia DeepMind and the 91.9% breakaway moment. And when I saw these numbers, I actually had to, double check them.
You're talking about the IMO-ProofBench Advanced.
Yes, and this isn't some multiple choice test, right?
Not at all. It's designed to stress multi-step reasoning. It's graded the way a mathematician would grade a proof.
Yeah.
It's unforgiving.
Okay, so listen to this leaderboard from the source. At the top is Aletheia with a score of 91.9%.
Which is, just incredibly high for this data set.
But wait till you hear second place. GPT 5.2 thinking is at 35.7%.
Just let that sink in for a second. We are not talking about a few percentage points here.
Not at all. Then you've got Gemini 3 Pro at 30%, and GPT 5.1 is way down at 7.1%.
So that gap between 91.9 and 35.7, that is not a slightly better model. The article says it suggests we are measuring a fundamentally different type of thing.
It feels almost unfair, like everyone else is running a 100-meter dash and Aletheia is driving a Ferrari.
And that leads us perfectly into the debate in the next section. Agent V's model fairness. Is this an apples to oranges comparison?
I mean, you have to ask. On one hand, you have these raw models just trying their best on the first shot. On the other, you have Aletheia, this whole orchestrated system with retries and tools.
It's like grading a bicycle against a commuter train, as the source puts it.
It is. But the no argument, the idea that this is fair, that's really compelling.
It is, because think about how real research happens. If you gave a mathematician a complex problem and said, you get one try, you can't check your work, and you can't look anything up,
They'd fail too.
they'd fail too. Real research is a workflow. You draft, you check, you refute yourself.
That's a great point.
So the article argues that a benchmark that punishes a system for doing the things researchers actually do. Well, that's the unfair benchmark.
So if you want to know which base model is smarter per token, this isn't the score. But if you want to know which approach actually produces correct proofs,
then Aletheia is the standard. It's about utility versus raw horsepower. You want results, you want the train, not the bike. You don't care that it has more parts, you care that it gets you there.
All right, so let's pop the hood. Section 4 gives us the architecture overview. We sort of touched on it, but let's get specific. It's the generator to verifier to revisor loop.
Sounds simple, but the execution is everything. First, you have the generator. Its job is breadth. It's fast, messy, creative.
It's brainstorming.
Exactly. It produces sketches of proofs, and the article says it's allowed to be wrong early.
I like that. It can't be perfect when you're just sketching an idea.
Then comes the verifier. The source calls this the vibe shift.
I love that phrase, the vibe shift.
It's perfect. It stops the forward momentum. It steps back and asks, okay, where are the gaps? It decouples generation from verification. If you let the same part of the brain that wrote the proof, check the proof.
It's going to have the same blind spots. It's like proofreading your own essay right after you write it. You miss everything because you know what you meant to say.
You don't see what you actually wrote. Exactly. And then finally, the revisor, it doesn't always throw the whole thing out. It just patches things. It might rewrite a single step or replace a lemma.
And it has that underrated feature.
The ability to admit defeat. To just say, I'm stuck. In research, a system saying I'm stuck is infinitely more valuable than a system that confidently hands you garbage. It saves time. It builds trust.
So we have this verifier. But what is it actually doing? Section 5 dives into how verification works. It's not just looking for typos, I assume.
No, and it's not running formal code checking either. That's an important distinction. This is a natural language verifier. It's checking for the things a human would look for. It's reading the logic.
The source lists some specific questions it asks, like, did you actually use the hypothesis you claimed you were using?
Right, or did you silently assume some quantity was positive? That happens constantly in math proofs. You just assume x is greater than 0 to make it work, but you never proved it.
And did you swap for all and there exists? That's a classic logic trend.
Yeah. The one that really stood out to me, though, was checking for proofs that teleport.
Teleporting proofs. I highlighted that too.
You know the type. The proof looks smooth, line 1, line 2, and then line 7 just magically jumps to conclusion. There's no bridge.
It's a leap of faith.
It's a leap of faith, and the verifier is designed to catch that specific hallucination of logic. It looks for that missing tissue, but it has its limits.
Right, it's not perfect.
Definitely not. It can't guarantee novelty, it can't guarantee full formal rigor, and it can't guarantee the conclusion wasn't smuggled into the proof, basically assuming what you're trying to prove. It raises the floor, but it doesn't replace the mathematician.
Speaking of mathematicians,
Yeah.
Section 6 talks about research hygiene, and the quote here is great. The enemy isn't algebra, it's the library.
This is such a huge issue for AI and science. Models hallucinate citations. They make up papers that sound real but don't exist. Or they reinvent something that was solved in the 70s and present it as brand new.
So Aletheia uses tools, like actual web search, to ground its work. But the part that really gave me pause was this discussion on subconscious plagiarism.
The Erdős case study, yeah, it's not malicious. It's that when a model or a human, frankly, reads enough math, they start to reproduce patterns. You might write a beautiful argument thinking it's yours, but you're just remembering something from the training data.
It's like humming a tune you think you wrote, but it's actually a Beatles song?
That's it, exactly. And when you're an AI that has scanned thousands of problems, that risk is incredibly high. So the takeaway is that you need explicit steps for grounding and attribution. You have to check the receipts.
Okay, let's get to the clickbait. Section 7. What counts as solving an open problem? There was so much buzz about AI solving problems from the Erdős database.
There was, and the article calls for adult-level precision here, which I really appreciate. We need to be so careful with words like solved.
Me too. So did it actually solve them?
Well, first let's define open. The analysis in the source found that many of these open problems were just obscure. They weren't impossible riddles, they were just questions nobody had updated the status on.
So some were already solved.
Yes. In some cases, Aletheia solved an open problem by finding the reference that showed it was already solved decades ago.
Which is still super useful. I mean, just cleaning up the database is real work.
Extremely useful. But it's different from generating a brand new proof. However, there is the case of Erdős 1 of 51. Aletheia did provide an autonomous solution there and even pushed toward a generalization, so it can do the real work, too.
The source lays out a whole spectrum of what solved can mean. 1. Found a correct argument. 2. Found the question was already answered. 3. Contributed an intermediate step.
And that spectrum is just the honest shape of research. It's rarely a single eureka moment. It's usually a mix of checking literature, feeling small gaps, and connecting dots.
Moving on to section 8. Turns out there isn't just one paper here, there are 2.
Right. The first one, towards autonomous mathematics research, is the one that frames Aletheia as this research agent. It proposes a taxonomy for autonomy so we don't get lost in the hype.
And a second one.
Accelerating scientific research. That one zooms out. It's not just math. It looks at CS theory, economics, physics. And it says that this recipe, this iterative refinement, decomposition, adversarial review, is a universal accelerator for science.
That's the key word. Recipe. It's not a magic trick. It's a method. It's transferable.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the technical why. Section 9 asks, why the performance jump happened now? If it's not just a bigger model, what is it? The term is Inference-Time scaling. Now, this sounds like jargon, but the article says it's maybe the most important concept here.
It is, and it's a concept you're going to hear a lot more about. Traditionally, we made models smarter by training them on more data, building a bigger brain. Inference-time scaling means spending more compute during the thinking process itself.
So just thinking longer.
Thinking broader and deeper. It's not just waiting. Think of it like a game of chess. A beginner looks at the board, makes the first move that looks okay.
Right.
A grandmaster sits there and simulates 20 possible futures, evaluates them, realizes 15 lead to a trap, and then chooses the single best path.
So the model's playing out all these scenarios before it answers.
That's it. It explores multiple paths. It's like Deem search with a critic. It spends its compute budget turning an almost right answer into an actually right answer by exploring and checking before it ever presents a solution.
The article says the jump is steering, not just horsepower.
That's the perfect analogy. You can have a fast car that's your raw model, but if you can't steer it around the corners of a complex proof, you're going to crash. This architecture provides the steering.
Okay, I know what you, the listener, are thinking right now. I want this. Give it to me. Section 10. Is Aletheia publicly available?
The short answer, no.
Oh, don't break their hearts.
Well, Aletheia DeepMind is an internal research workflow. It's not a button you can just click on the internet. It requires a lot of orchestration to work.
But there is something called Gemini DeepThink.
Yes, and the article clarifies this, which is good because it's confusing. You can use the DeepThink toggle in Gemini. That gives you the model mode. It thinks longer. It uses that inference time scaling we just talked about.
But it doesn't give you the full agent.
No, you don't get the full harness. It doesn't have that external verifier loop, the tool use, the revisor architecture.
However, the expert in the article offers a DIY version for you listeners.
And it's great advice. If you want to replicate this, don't just ask the AI for an answer. You have to build the loop yourself. First, generate maybe 3 to 10 solutions.
Okay.
Then, run a separate prompt, your verifier, that's told to aggressively hunt for gaps in those solutions.
Step 3. Revise only what gets flagged.
And step 4, stop when your verifier finds no more holes. You are basically building the loop manually. You're the orchestrator.
Got it. Section 11 gives a quick 1-minute clarification between Gemini DeepThink and Deep Research, because those sound almost identical.
They do, but DeepThink is about reasoning. Math, logic, it's inward-looking. Deep Research is about gathering. Browsing, organizing, synthesizing info, it's outward-looking.
So if I want to solve a logic puzzle, I use DeepThink. If I want the history of logic puzzles, Deep Research.
And if you want reliability, you care about that verification loop in both cases.
Finally, Section 12, the big question. What does this imply about AGI?
The hype train went a little off the rails with this one, didn't it?
Yeah, it solved Erdős problems, therefore it's a scientist. We're done.
And the article shuts that down pretty hard. It reminds us that capability is not autonomy. Humans chose the problems. Humans set the standards. Humans judge the novelty. Aletheia is a tool. It doesn't wake up in the morning wondering about prime numbers.
But, as the article also says, research collaborator is a very high bar to clear.
Oh, it's a massive deal to have a system that can genuinely collaborate, catch your mistakes, and fill in gaps. That changes how science is done. It moves us from AI as a typewriter to AI as a lab partner.
The closing thought from the source is just perfect. Don't worship the score, steal the workflow.
That's the whole lesson right there. It's not about the 91.9%. It's about the fact that the process generate, verify, revise is how we get closer to the truth.
And that brings us to the end. But before we go, I want to leave you with a thought based on that subconscious plagiarism idea.
Go for it.
So, if these systems eventually ingest and synthesize the entire history of mathematics, and if every new idea they generate is just a pattern match from some database we forgot existed, does the definition of original thought change? Are we moving into a world where discovery isn't about finding something new, but about recovering something we lost in the library?
That is a haunting thought. It suggests maybe everything has already been thought of, and we're just now building a machine that can remember it all at once.
Something to mull over.
Yeah.
As always, you can find the link to the full article on binary versus AI if you want to dig into the source PDFs yourself. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.